Welcome to the Universal Spirit Research Lab of Sakimori. Thank you very much for visiting us from among the many channels. We appreciate your continued support. Last time, we examined the activities of Onisaburo Deguchi around 1936, which was 15 years after 1921, when Rudolf Steiner predicted that something could be experienced about the Maitreya Bodhisattva of the 20th century. We also discussed how Onisaburo Deguchi wrote in a book published in December 1935 about the vow of Maitreya's descent and Christ's second coming, and the final Great Pass, which indicated 1944. This time, we will examine the relationship between the legend of Maitreya Bodhisattva in the Buddhist scriptures, the content of the Buddhist scriptures that Steiner spoke of, and Onisaburo Deguchi's ascetic practice at Takakuma mountain. Please note that this video is translated from Japanese using AI, so please understand in advance. Let's get started right away. In the Buddhist scriptures, there are 6 scriptures that specifically mention Maitreya Bodhisattva. These are collectively referred to as Maitreya Sutra or Maitreya Six-Part Sutra. This time, I would like to briefly introduce the following 2 representative scriptures that are thought to be related to Steiner's lecture content. The first one is Maitreya Descent Sutra and the second one is Maitreya Becoming Buddha Sutra. Firstly, in the Maitreya Descent Sutra, the story centers around Mahakassapa, one of Shakyamuni's disciples. Maitreya Bodhisattva, who resides in the heavenly world, established the beautiful city as the place of reincarnation, established his parents, descended, and was born that night. At that time, Mahakassapa, who had received Shakyamuni's command, continued to meditate without entering nirvana and waited for Maitreya in a stone cave in the mountains. Eventually, Maitreya Bodhisattva, accompanied by his disciples, meets Mahakassapa, who removes all earthly desires and continues to seek the Buddha's path. At this time, Bodhisattva Maitreya took Mahakassapa's robe and put it on himself, and Mahakassapa's body broke into pieces and disappeared. The robe that was handed down from Mahakassapa to Maitreya is said to symbolize the Buddhist truth that has been passed down from Shakyamuni to Mahakassapa, and then to Maitreya Bodhisattva, over a long period of time. Next, in the Maitreya Becomes a Buddha Sutra, one of the 10 great disciples of Shakyamuni is walking with Shakyamuni on a mountain. Shakyamuni expounds a teaching in the form of a verse saying, "A person with unparalleled merit will be born." Hearing this, people gather and plead for him to teach about this person. Shakyamuni then begins to talk about Maitreya, who will be born in a beautiful city in the future. The story that Shakyamuni tells his disciples is said to almost match the content of the previous Maitreya Descent Sutra. Then, after receiving the monk's staff from Mahakassapa, Maitreya is said to enter nirvana after living for 60 trillion years. After Shakyamuni finished preaching these teachings, he encouraged us to retain and not forget this teaching of the Buddha. Cheers rise from the gathered audience, and this sutra ends. In his lectures on the Gospel of Matthew, Rudolf Steiner refers to an old Indian legend and describes the content of the Buddhist scriptures as follows. The past evolution comes to an end and the flow of Indian sages also ends by Gautama Siddhartha Shakyamuni, the son of King Suddhodana, becoming a Buddha. When one bodhisattva becomes a Buddha, a new bodhisattva appears afterwards. The old Indian legend expresses this by saying that before descending to the earth to become a Buddha as the son of King Suddhodana, the bodhisattva handed over the crown of the bodhisattva to the next one in the spiritual world. Since then, there has been a successor to the Buddha. I plan to touch on this at another opportunity, but Steiner posits that there are 12 bodhisattvas, originating from the earth, under the central figure of Christ, the Sun God. And one of them is Shakyamuni. And with Shakyamuni becoming a Buddha, Maitreya has newly joined as a bodhisattva. And about Kassapa, who appears in the Maitreya Descent Sutra, he says the following. Let's place the Eastern legend, which includes the mystery and essence of humans, before our spiritual eyes once again. It is the legend of the great sage Kasayapa, a disciple of the enlightened Shakyamuni Buddha. He encompassed all the wisdom of the East with a large perspective and a huge impulse. Those who followed him were able to preserve only a very small amount of what he drew from the deep well of wisdom of Shakyamuni. Kasayapa was the last human to receive what was given to humanity from the original cosmic wisdom. And in the Maitreya Descent Sutra, he speaks about the location of the cave where Kasayapa hid as follows. Other disciples could not fully understand the comprehensive wisdom taught by the Buddha, but the great disciple Kasayapa understood. He was one of the most important disciples of the Buddha, who delved deepest into the Buddha's teachings. As death approached and he was about to enter nirvana, Kasayapa climbed a steep mountain and hid in a cave. Inside this cave, his body remained undecayed even after death. Only the initiates know where Kasayapa's body is eternally resting. In a secret place, the body of the great initiate Kasayapa is eternally resting. In other words, the cave where Kasayapa is eternally resting has been recognized only among those who have entered the mystery, as a truth that spiritually manifests from the time of Shakyamuni to the present, not as a legend of the distant past. And about Maitreya Bodhisattva visiting Kasayapa's cave, it is said as follows. The Buddha had previously spoken that someday Maitreya, the new great teacher of humanity and the successor to the Buddha, would come. And when Maitreya reaches the pinnacle of his earthly life, he will find the cave where Kasayapa is, and touch the immortal body of the enlightened Kasayapa with his right hand. Then, a supernatural fire will flow from the sky, and in that fire, the immortal body of the great enlightened Kasayapa will change from an earthly existence to a spiritual existence, said the Buddha. Feeling that death and nirvana were approaching, Kasayapa went to a cave in a certain mountain. There he died, and his body remained without decaying. His body was not found by ordinary people, but only by mature individuals who had been initiated into the mystery and had been imparted the secret. The immortal body of Kasayapa, hidden in a mysterious way, is resting in a cave in a certain mountain. It is prophesied that Maitreya, the great announcer of the new cosmic wisdom, will go to the cave where Kasayapa's body lies sleeping when he reaches the pinnacle of his earthly existence as Maitreya Buddha. When Maitreya Buddha touches Kasayapa with his right hand, a supernatural fire will descend from the universe, envelop Kasayapa's immortal body, and carry it away to the spiritual world. Thus, I believe it is clear that the content of Steiner's lectures explains the Maitreya Descent Sutra as an Eastern mystery, illuminating it with his own spiritual recognition. The legend of the Venerable Kasayapa, who is said to be waiting for Maitreya Bodhisattva in a cave in the mountains as prophesied by the Buddha, has been reproduced by Onisaburo Deguchi with many common points. In the hometown of Onisaburo Deguchi, currently Kamioka City, Kyoto Prefecture, Japan, there was a legend that Prince Yamato-hiko, the fifth-generation grandson of the 14th Emperor Choi, fled to Takakuma Mountain, a spiritual mountain in this area, to avoid becoming emperor, and spent his life missing. This was said to be during the era of the 25th Emperor Buretsu 498 to 506 AD. In 1898, when Onisaburo Deguchi was 27 years old, he was guided by a spiritual divine messenger to do a 7-day cave training in this cave of Takakuma Mountain. During this time, in the real world, it was said that he was not allowed to take a drop of water in his mouth in the severe cold of the cave of Takakuma Mountain. On the other hand, his soul was guided by a spiritual divine messenger to explore heaven, hell, and the intermediate realm, starting from Mount Fuji and Minakami Mountain. Thus, this harsh 1-week training is said to have been repeated with 2 hours of real-world training and 1 hour of spiritual world training. Later, he expressed the harshness of his spiritual world training by saying, 1 hour of spiritual world training was 10 times harder. By overcoming such training, he was able to acquire divine powers such as the divine eye, divine ear, knowledge of others' minds, divine speech, and knowledge of past lives. About this, Onisaburo Deguchi himself said, "It was like a kindergarten student graduating from university and advancing to a doctoral position in an instant. I was able to penetrate the past, present, and future, and I was able to glimpse the mysteries of the divine world, and I was able to know events in the real world hundreds and thousands of years later. Thus, even after finishing the first Takakuma mountain training in 1898, Onisaburo Deguchi had the second training in May of the same year, and the third training in the early summer of 1902, and each time his spiritual insights became wider and deeper, and he acquired amazing spiritual abilities. In this way, Onisaburo Deguchi, by training in the cave of Takakuma mountain, where the legend of the Prince Yamato Hiko, who hid and spent his life, was left, acquires superhuman spiritual abilities. And this overlaps with the existence of Kasyapa and Maitreya Bodhisattva in the Buddhist scripture Maitreya Descent Sutra. In other words, the following relationship is established. Kasyapaha is equivalent to Prince Yamato Hiko, and Maitreya Bodhisattva is equivalent to Onisaburo Deguchi. Also, in Japan at this time, there was a scholar of spiritual language, Masumi Oishigori, who spiritually deciphered the Buddha's Maitreya Descent Sutra. And he asserted as follows. Present-day Japan is as prophesied in the Maitreya Sutra, and the land of Maitreya's descent is Great Japan. Now is the time for Maitreya to manifest in the great divine person who has accomplished his deeds. Onisaburo Deguchi had been learning the study of spiritual language from his grandmother since he was a child, but his encounter with Masumi Oishigori deepened his understanding of spiritual language even more. Furthermore, the mechanism of Maitreya's 3,000 years proposed by Masumi Oishigori would later be fulfilled by Onisaburo Deguchi. In this way, Onisaburo Deguchi, guided by the divine teacher, went through the cave training of Takakuma mountain 3 times from the age of 27 to 31, and acquired astonishing spiritual abilities. In conclusion, in this 4th session, we have compared the content of the scriptures about Maitreya Bodhisattva, prophesied by Buddha in the Buddhist scriptures, with the content of Steiner's lectures. Furthermore, we have explained about the training of Onisaburo Deguchi in Takakuma mountain, who followed the same pattern as the Maitreya Bodhisattva prophesied. In the next session, we plan to discuss the past life of Maitreya Bodhisattva, who is said to have reincarnated in the 1st century BC as told by Steiner, and the deep connection with the Essenes and Jesus Christ. Thank you very much for watching until the end. We look forward to your continued support.